Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah for joining. I hope more and more people will join while we start the program, inshallah. So I think we can now get started, Atiyah, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Should we wait a couple more minutes to get started?
Yeah. Yeah, we can get started when you're ready. Yeah, inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's here. We're going to be doing a program on how to prepare for high school. This is mainly going to be geared for parents and students who, or parents of students and students who are either going to be entering high school or in the early stages of high school and need a little bit more guidance on what your different options are as you go through these 4 years. So we'll start with a quick panel introduction of everyone who's going to be presenting today. I'll introduce myself first really quickly. My name is Atiyah, for those of you who don't know. I'm currently an R&D engineer at Johnson & Johnson, and I'm doing my master's in engineering at UCLA.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdul Salam. I'm an incoming freshman at UCLA, and I went to Bellarmine College Prep, which is a Catholic school in San Jose for high school. And yeah.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Adil, and I'm studying computer science at UC Davis. I transferred from Las Positas College, and I'm going to be a junior in this upcoming fall.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shahana, and I'm an incoming freshman at Texas A&M. I just graduated from Lynbrook High School.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Anas. I'm a third year at UC Davis, and I'm studying in neurobiology, and I went to high school at Wilcox.
So at the end of this entire presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session. I'm going to leave this up on the screen for about a minute so people can scan the QR code and fill out the Google form. If you have any questions, we'll look through the form. Some of them may get answered throughout the presentation, but if not, we will answer them at the end. So please take a minute, scan, and ask any questions if you have any.
Also, feel free to ask as many questions as you want. We'll answer all of them at the end. And if you don't manage to get the QR code or link down right now, you can also go back to the original email and it'll be there as well.
Give it another minute, then we can move on. All right. So just to walk everyone through our agenda today, we're going to be talking about first our traditional high school pathway, so what options you have available for classes to take in high school. Then we will be talking about extracurriculars, so this will cover a wide range of different kinds of activities students can do throughout high school to put on their college applications. And we'll talk about standardized testing. A lot of things for testing has been changing in recent years, so it's important to know what's available and what's not. And then we'll talk about alternative pathways. So people who are not looking at the traditional four-year high school route before college, what are different sort of options they can go through. And finally, we'll be talking about student wellness. So what students can do to manage their time and make sure that their physical and mental wellness is good throughout high school. So we'll start with talking about high school courses.
All right, so for general classes, there are minimum requirements that you need to complete in order to graduate high school. So that includes 3 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, 3 years of social science, 1 year of visual or performing arts, foreign language, or career technical education, 2 years of PE, and maybe even other coursework adopted by your local school district. But obviously, these are the minimum requirements, and most people, it's pretty easy to complete these requirements. But what's most important to note is that now that you know the minimum requirements, it's important to plan it out in a way that will make your application look the best. For example, some people tend to say that, or what's usually, what colleges usually look for is that they pay attention to your 11th grade and 10th grade grades the most. So maybe you want to avoid taking these performing arts classes during your 11th and 10th grade because those don't really matter too much and they're just to fill the requirements for high school graduation. And to clarify what visual or performing arts is, it can include a variety of things like arts, 3D design. I personally did choir, and you also want to keep an eye out for your foreign language. Sometimes it's a continuation of what you did in middle school, or if not, you can obviously start over in high school, but you also want to keep in mind like how many years you're planning to take foreign language, which foreign language is available at your high school, etc. So we just went over the high school graduation requirements, which is according to your own high school, but the UCs and some other schools have their own recommended coursework plan. For example, if you look here, it says that if you go to E, you can see that it says that 2 years of foreign language is required, 3 years is recommended, and they have their own like recommended course plan. So it's best to keep an eye out for graduation requirements / recommendations for schools you're interested in. So the next topic is going to be AP and honors classes. So first, honors classes. They're generally faster paced, more advanced courses. they add about 0.5 points to your they add 0.5 points to your GPA. They're not for college credit, but they do show rigor in your coursework. And by personal experience, I found that honors classes were definitely more advanced and more difficult than normal classes, but they're not going to be as hard or as fast-paced as the next one, which is AP classes or advanced placement classes, which are high school courses that allow you to earn college credit at the same time. So how much college credit you earn is determined by the score you receive on the AP exam at the end of the school year. So sometimes it's from a range of 0 to 5. The AP exam at the end of the year, your score ranges from 0 to 5. So some schools accept the credit of a score of 3, some schools require a score of 4, etc. So again, you want to look at that on each college's page. And AP classes add 1 point to your GPA, and they show college level rigor in your coursework because it allows you to earn college credit, which means it's at that level. And generally people ask like, what's the workload for AP classes and things like that? It's definitely difficult, but it's doable. And I would recommend that you take AP classes that match with what your interests are in. So number one, you do better, you're more interested in it, and it aligns with what pathway you want to pursue in the future. And a big note here is to be careful with the AP classes you take. You don't want to take all the AP classes just so your transcript looks better. Take the AP classes that you're most interested in and will highlight points that you want to eventually highlight in your college application. For example, I'm going in the engineering business route, so I took heavier math classes like AP Calc, AP Physics, but I didn't take classes like AP History or AP US History because that just didn't align with the pathway I wanted to do. So yeah. And unweighted versus weighted GPA, it's a really, so basically what it is unweighted GPA, the GPA scale is from 0 to 4.0. Academic rigor isn't taken into account. So for example, your AP classes and honors classes and regular classes all have the same weight, and each course has equal value. So if you get an A in all your classes, you have a 4.0. So each A is 4 points. Each B is then 3 points, and C 2 points, and then so on. And then for your weighted GPA, it's typically from 0 to 5.0. And this does take into account the type of class you're taking, like AP or honors. So each AP class you take, it's on a scale of 5 instead of 4. So an A is of 5 points, B is 4 points, etc. And for honors classes, like I mentioned in the previous slide, it adds 0.5. So an A is 4.5, a B is 3.5, etc. And some schools calculate their own GPA, like the UCs. They have their own method of calculating their GPA, but we mostly focus on unweighted and weighted GPA. So some people ask like which one's better, but I don't think that there's one that's better, but you should aim to keep your unweighted GPA as high as possible because that just shows how many A's you've gotten throughout your high school career, and we want to keep that as high as possible. But weighted GPA shows how much rigor you put in your high school classes.
All right, we'll go into extracurriculars. We'll start by talking about what clubs and student organizations are typically available in high school. We sort of narrowed this down into 5 different types of clubs that you can look for. One being competitive clubs. So this is where you're allowed to compete in specific academic or skill area. This typically requires hours of preparation. They're high commitment clubs. Some of the examples are speech and debate, mock trial, model UN, DECA, etc. So all of these require lots of preparations. They're usually done in a group, and they require a lot more commitment than other types of clubs. The second is interest-based. So if you have a specific personal hobby or a passion in a non-academic subject, you can go into an interest-based club. This can be something like if you're passionate about art or if you're passionate about film or creative writing, there's a club out there for everyone. So if you're interested in something specific, I'd suggest that you join that kind of club. And these are a little bit more lax in terms of how much commitment you have and the time that you'll be spending with the club members. Then we'll talk about academic clubs. These are typically clubs that directly relate to a specific academic sector. So this is to enrich your activity in academia specifically. So examples of this could be like computer science club or math club or specific foreign language clubs. Again, all of these are good. None have like weight over the other. So it really just depends on what you excel at and what you are interested in. Leadership organizations are slightly different. Some of them don't necessarily follow into the category of what we refer to as a club. ASB, the Associated Student Body or Student Council, is typically the student body that runs the school. And this requires like a voting process, campaigning, typical for a high school. And this is entirely different from clubs, but it is a very valuable skill if you're going into something that is more related to like law or political science in college. Student publications are also an option. National Honor Society, all schools have this available. So if you're interested in a very specific role that would give you more leadership potential, I would suggest looking into these kinds of activities. And finally, a lot of schools have clubs that allow you to pursue community service opportunities. So this includes CSF for California specifically. This is the California Scholarship Federation. They encourage a lot of different kinds of volunteer opportunities, and some students even get scholarships from this. The Red Cross and Key Club are all pretty common across all high schools, but there are different variations from high school to high school for what community service clubs look like. So if you want to increase your volunteer hours, spend more time with your peers who have similar interests, I would definitely suggest looking at community service clubs. One of the most important things is do not join 70 different clubs because it wouldn't really matter to you. You want to join a couple of clubs that really cater to your specific skills and interests and that you can personally shine in. And so clubs that are not really of interest to you will ultimately just waste your time and waste everybody else's time. And this is also kind of a caveat, but if there isn't a club that you're particularly interested in, but you have an idea for one, you can start a club in high school. Typically, the student body or any of the advisors that are for clubs are very encouraging of students who are looking to start their own student organization. So if there's something that you have in mind, whether that's an interest-based club or an academic club, just to bring students together, schools are usually pretty open to allow students to go through the process of creating their own club. This does require a little bit more responsibility, but again, it would also look very great on college applications, and you're also doing something for your school for future students to come.
What about scout programs?
Scout programs do count as an extracurricular activities. They're completely different than what are available in schools, but it does count as an extracurricular activity. But just as a general note, let's keep all Q&A to the Google form, which we will answer at the end.
Okay, so we've talked about grades and we've already talked about clubs, and this basically encompasses what you can do in school. Now, community service is going to continue to set you apart from the huge applicant pool when you're applying to college. And community service is also going to be important because it shows certain qualities that other activities may not. So for example, if you're out there cleaning up beaches with a certain organization, it shows that you care about your environment and that you're willing to spend time on it. If you're restoring senior homes in your community, it shows that you're a selfless person and you're willing to put time and effort to help others for the good of your community. So there's a bunch of different community service activities that you can do. You could be at food banks, soup kitchens, local parks, city events, nonprofit organizations. There's also special clubs. For example, I worked with an organization called GINA, where we helped special needs kids and basically taught them stuff like robotics, playing with like certain toys that improve like hand-eye coordination and things like that. Local recreation centers, you could be working at the YMCA, teaching kids sports. That could also count as community service. Hospitals, they do have volunteer programs where you can basically help with basic activities through some training. And lastly, you could also be working at libraries. This is a very popular one for high school kids because there's not a lot of training involved and you can get a lot of hours from it. Now, with all this in mind, here are some tips that may help you in narrowing down which community service activity you should be doing. Number one, try not to do a bunch. Keep it relevant to what you want to do in the future. So for example, if you want to go into public health and safety, try to do community service events that kind of center around that. There's a lot. If you're trying to do computer science, try to do activities that relate to computer science. It's just going to help strengthen your portfolio and your application when you get to that point where you're trying to apply for colleges. Also, try to commit long-term to an activity. Not only will this look good on your application, seeing that you've worked with a certain organization for years, it'll also help you build up good experiences, because when you're bouncing from organization to organization, just doing a couple hours here and there, there's a higher chance that you're not really going to have a very good interaction with the people there, and you're not going to be leaving with good memories. And going down the line, when you're applying for colleges, you're not really going to have good experiences to write about in your essays, versus if you're really spending time on one or two activities and you're getting to meet a lot of people and you're traveling all over the place doing what you're doing, you may have a greater chance of, I don't know, meeting someone memorable, writing about that in your college essay, and just having a good experience overall. And lastly, try to show progression. So in a lot of organizations, they do have like a leadership ladder. Try to climb up that leadership, try to recruit others, see if you can hold a position that may, transfer into you, showing that you're capable of having multiple people work under you, and that you are someone that's active in your organization and you're not just showing up for events and getting service hours. And so basically employment is another level, I guess I would say, of community service, except for high school kids, it's a little more narrowed down, that you can't really work everywhere. It's going to be hard for you to find a job at a company if you're trying to do computer science in the future. So the only thing I would say about this is, if you can find a place of employment that is relevant to you, definitely try to apply and take that job offer, because number one, when you're working in like a professional setting, you're not only working with other high school kids, potentially, you're also working with people that have degrees and people that have been working in the field for a long time. So you may be able to gain valuable insight into whatever profession that you want to go into. And another thing is that it's also going to tell a lot about you in terms of being timely and being someone who's able to work in like an office and work with deadlines, work with initiatives, and take care of tasks that have been assigned to you. You could do all these things at like local offices, like community offices, tutoring centers, which is very popular, where you're basically teaching kids math, science, all that stuff. Shops, cafes, gyms, recreation and community centers, working as a fitness attendant, a lot of things like that. Again, it's the employment scope for high school kids is not very wide, but if you do find something that is relevant to you and you like it, definitely apply. It's only going to contribute to whatever you're doing and contribute to your college profile down the line. And then lastly, sports. So I know a lot of people are doing sports in high school nowadays. I'm just going to go through the different competition levels. So firstly, you have recreation, which is just below high school. This one is typically you can just join, no questions asked. High school sports is where typically you get the experience of playing with other high schools, and a lot of people put this on their college apps. I did cross country in high school or football in high school for 4 years. On top of high school, a little bit more competitive is the amateur leagues or club sports. Now, if you feel that you're doing really good in high school and you really want to shine, you can go ahead and bump up to this level, and everything above that goes through amateur leagues. So if you're thinking of doing a sport, just consider how, good you are and how much effort you want to put into it, and then apply to each level accordingly if you can find teams near you. Now, there are some things that I want to talk about regarding sports. A lot of people do sports, but you should do something that you want. Don't get forced into doing something. For example, I was basically forced into doing cross country because I really wasn't doing a lot of sports in high school and I absolutely hated it. So what happened was over time, there were a lot of what they call invitationals, which are events that you don't really have to go to, but they only look good on your profile if you go to them. I just started skipping out on those. So I wasn't really getting the benefit of the full cross country experience in high school. And I sort of regretted wasting months doing that. So do a sport that you feel like it's not going to be a burden to you. Because remember, you're going to be in school, you're going to be stressed with tests and whatnot. Make sure that whatever sport you're doing is going to be some sort of an escape or something that you love doing. And if you're really serious about that sport, consider attending camps and enrichment events outside of school so that when you're applying, you can say that I not only did this in high school, but on my own time, I went to camps, I talked to people that were professionals in the sport, or I went to teaching events where they talked about their experiences to really show that you're motivated to do what you're doing. And if you can, hold leadership in your sport. It may be a little hard, but they do have positions such as team captaincy, offense and defensive captains. Holding a leadership position in your sport can be really valuable because it will speak volumes about your leadership and your teamwork efforts. Now, outside of sports, you can have non-traditional hobbies such as one-off initiatives. So if you guys are into computer science, you probably know about hackathons and like these 48-hour coding events. Those are really nice to put on your portfolio too if you can get them done. They're really cool as well. There's also stuff like personal projects and interests. I know a friend who put together a portfolio of just basically pictures that he took over 4 years. And on his college application, he basically went into detail explaining what it was and then wrote a whole essay about that. So doing things on your own, putting together like a little, I don't know, a little album of your photos, it could be really important to you. And although it may not be like an official sport or like an official community service or club related thing, it could be really important because those experiences could translate into you writing a good college essay.
Okay, so sports, extracurriculars, classes, those are the fun parts of high school. And then there's standardized testing. I don't know anyone who looks forward to standardized testing, but ultimately it's something that you have to do in order to kind of prove yourself to colleges and to prove yourself as a student. Now, the first test I'm going to be talking about is the PSAT. The PSAT stands for the pre-SAT, and it's basically just like the SAT, but it's a little bit shorter. And there's 4 sections in the test. There's reading comprehension, writing and grammar, math with a calculator, and math without a calculator. So in reading comprehension, you're given a passage and you have to analyze the passage and then answer a couple questions about it. In writing and grammar, you have to analyze sections and find out the grammar mistakes in the sections. And then math with calculator and without calculator are pretty self-explanatory. And the whole test is also multiple choice. And the test is scored out of 15, 20 points. And the scores are on an increment of 10 points. So you could get a score like 1400, 1410, 1450, but not in between those 10-point increments. So what is the point of the PSAT? Well, the PSAT is basically to give you a taste of what the SAT is like. And the PSAT is essentially taken either in sophomore year or junior year. And the preference of which year you want to take it in is up to you and sometimes up to your school. But there is something special about the PSAT. There's a corporation called the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. And if you score in the top 1% of scores in your state, they will offer you a scholarship. Now, basically, the 1% of the scores can range depending on which state we're in. Since we're in California, it's a bit more competitive. But usually that signifies a score of around 1470 or above. Now, if you manage to get that score, the National Merit Scholarship Corporation will enter you in a scholarship competition. Additionally, if you put your National Merit Scholarship semifinalist status on your college applications, many times schools will offer you full scholarships. So there are tons of schools around the nation which offer completely full ride scholarships for students who have a full score on the, or a National Merit Scholarship score on the PSAT. For example, Texas Tech, Washington State, Tulane University are some great colleges which have these offers. So after that, there is the SAT and the ACT. I'll cover them both together, SAT and the ACT. The SAT stands for the Scholastic Aptitude Test, and the ACT stands for American College Testing's test. They're both essentially testing the same subjects, but the ACT has a different section. So the SAT has reading, writing, math with a calculator, and math without a calculator, but the ACT has reading, writing, math, and science. So there's that extra science section on the ACT. The main differences between the SAT and the ACT are that the SAT is longer and it has more questions, but you get more time per question. And the ACT is shorter, there's less questions, but you get less time per question. So you have to go faster. So a lot of people ask, how do you decide which test to take? And honestly, there's really no way to find out which one you're better at than to actually take both the tests. So the best way to decide which test you want to take is to take practice tests for both. Now, another thing people ask is, should I take both the tests? In almost 99% of cases, I would say no, it wouldn't be useful to take both the ACT and the SAT because they test essentially the same thing. Now, here's the important part. How do we prepare? I think the preparation for the PSAT, the SAT, and the ACT is largely all the same. It's like playing a sport. Imagine a basketball player, and you're just learning how to shoot the ball. Initially, you're not going to recognize how to place your arms, how to shoot the ball, but eventually, over years and years of practice, that becomes second nature to you. That becomes muscle memory. And the SAT is the same way. The questions are essentially duplicates of each other, but they have changed wording and changed patterns. The patterns are all there in the text. You just have to have the muscle memory to recognize them. So the most important thing in SAT preparation and ACT preparation is repetition. You have to keep repeating, taking practice tests and taking practice questions over and over and over again. And additionally, there are certain organizations out there that will offer classes for test preparation. Now, I think Anes wanted to hop in and talk about that.
So my experience with a testing center was with Excel. So the summer before my junior year, I basically spent 4 days out of the week during summer going to this testing academy. And what they did there was basically teach us how to answer questions and made us do as many practice questions as possible. Now, the thing about going to testing academies is that some people may benefit from it just because of how rigorous it is and what they teach. And some people may not because they prefer a more personalized approach where they sit down with a book and kind of just answer questions on their own and see what their best approach is. For me, I really liked how I was able to bounce off different ideas on how to solve questions and how to approach certain sections in like a classroom setting with other kids. And I also found that there were kids from my high school there because it was a local center. So I really enjoyed it. And I found that it really, really benefited my score. So definitely look into testing centers and see if you can find out what they do during classes before you register for them and whether that tailors to your learning style, because sometimes you may end up paying a lot of money going to these classrooms and you just end up sitting there not liking what's happening and just being there for the practice questions.
Thanks, Anas. The one thing I want to stress most about practice and preparation for the PSAT, SAT, ACT is that you need to start early. You need to start ahead of time. It's like, just like I said before, it's like playing a sport. The best players in any sport are those who've been training for the longest. So in order to prepare and be ready for the PSAT, SAT, ACT in your junior year of high school, which is your third year, you really need to be starting at the end of 9th grade or in the middle of 10th grade, in somewhere in that range, which gives you a good 1.5, 2 years of preparation upcoming to the test. Now, in the beginning, like 9th grade, 10th grade, you don't want to be spending that much time studying for the SAT or ACT, maybe an hour or two a week. But when it comes to midway through sophomore year, you want to be putting in solid hours towards that goal. And in the summer between sophomore year and junior year, that should be one of the main things you're doing. There's a lot of self-studying resources. So Anas talked about test prep centers. Additionally, you can study by yourself. You can get a tutor online. The one thing I would recommend about getting a tutor online is get someone who's reputable. I actually had a personal experience with this. My parents had hired a Craigslist tutor, basically, who claimed he had helped a lot of students get 1550 or above on the SAT. And I worked with him for a while, but after a while, he stopped responding to my texts. He started asking my parents for more money for different things like his surgeries, his car accidents. You want to go with someone who's reputable. You want to go with someone who you know has helped other people in the community. Now, the biggest resource that helped me was Khan Academy, and it's completely free. If you go on Khan Academy and go to the SAT prep section, you can enter in your current status, so how much you've studied, and you can enter in your desired score, and it'll basically build you a plan. It'll build you a plan online of how you need to study, how many problems you need to do every single day. So I just followed that plan, and it actually improved my score a ton. Now, the second most important thing, or the most important thing actually, is just taking actual practice tests. Now, a lot of people try to make practice tests that replicate the SAT, but the best thing you can do is take the official SAT practice tests. So if you go online to the College Board website, which is the company that runs the SAT, they have all their practice tests listed there. So I would recommend you get started there. Yeah. The last disclaimer I want to say is that many colleges didn't require the SAT or ACT for the past couple of years because of COVID. For example, I think the 2021-22 cycle, most of the colleges did not require the SAT or ACT. They were test optional, which means you can send it in, but it's also okay if you don't send it in. So it's good to check the college website to see their policy, to decide whether you want to send in your SAT or ACT or if you don't want to. And another thing is that the UC colleges, the University of California system, does not require or even take any testing that you would submit. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next thing is AP exams. So AP stands for Advanced Placement. This is run by the same corporation that runs the SAT and PSAT. But the test is kind of different. So this is a cumulative test, meaning they cover everything that you learn in your AP class. So before, Shahana was talking about what an AP class is and how it's kind of basically an introductory college course. Essentially, an AP test is like the final exam for that course. So the test can have a varying number of questions. It usually has multiple sections, but in total, it's usually around 3 to 4 hours long. And the score that they give you, they score it over the summer because it's not a multiple choice test. It's actually like written in some cases. There's both multiple choice questions and written questions. So it takes a couple of months to score, and then they give you the score at the end of the summer after you've taken it. So the score is between 1 and 5. You can get a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. A 3 is a passing grade, and that basically means you're proficient in the subject. So many people use AP scores, their scores on the AP exams, to get college credit. But different colleges have different policies. Certain colleges may not take your AP test or may only take a couple of them. So you definitely want to check that policy before you try to get college credit or take an AP exam. There's also self-studying. You can take an AP exam without actually being in the class. When I was in sophomore year, I took AP chemistry without being in the class. And I had a lot of free time, so it worked out and I got a 5 and it was good. But in junior year, when I didn't have a lot of time, I was overloaded. I took AP computer science and I ended up just dropping it because I didn't have enough time. And the last thing I want to say is that GPA is way more important than AP tests, because AP tests, you don't have to send your AP score to your college. It's actually optional whether or not you want to send it in. So you can just send the good scores that you get. There's very low pressure. It's always better to just maintain your GPA and keep it high than focus on AP exam preparation. All right.
All right, to round out our section about high school, we're going to really quickly talk about what is the most important, what we should be focusing on. So out of all of the things that we spoke about, to people who are going into high school or are already in high school, your GPA matters the most. What grades you get matter the most. And so if you're going into high school, anything that you do starting in your freshman year of high school will matter for your college applications. For those of you who are already in high school, anything that you do moving forward will matter a lot in your college applications. Extracurriculars, standardized tests, everything is very, very important, but your GPA is going to have the most weight on your college applications. A lot of colleges actually have a minimum GPA required to apply. Some very high-level colleges do definitely have a minimum GPA. Some of it is unsaid, but if you go through a lot of the student profiles of those who have been admitted into the schools, you'll notice that there's typically sort of a range of GPA that those people have had. And you want to take a closer look at that for schools that you are aiming for and work towards achieving that. We didn't talk about this a lot, but I want to cover it very quickly. Recommendation letters are something that is required for certain private colleges. And this is not something you have to think about very early on in high school, but I just wanted to make the note for students to build good professional relationships with their teachers in high school. You're going to be asking those same teachers that you're taking classes with for recommendation letters for colleges that you may apply to in your last year of high school. So typically your sophomore, junior year teachers is what a lot of people ask their recommendation letters from. It can be any teacher, but again, the point here is to build and maintain those professional relationships with your teachers. And finally, tying this all back into essays is that any extracurriculars that you do, any activity that you do is going to be put into your entire story in a college application. You're basically telling the admissions officer a story about yourself over the last 4 years. So anything that you've done, anything that matters to you is going to go in your application and in your essays. So make sure anything that you do is very meaningful and impactful. So we're going to move on from the traditional high school pathway, and Ajal is going to talk about alternative pathways that you can go through.
Okay. So the first alternative pathway we'll talk about is dual enrollment. So basically what dual enrollment is where you can enroll in a community college to complete certain high school courses. So let's say, for example, you want to do a biology course at a community college. You can request at your high school that you want to take it at this specific college. And by taking it at that community college, you can actually earn college credit. And sometimes you can even put it as an AP class on your transcript. So essentially you're earning college credit. It's basically guaranteed college credit. You don't have to take any exam at the end of the year like you would have to for an AP class. You just need to pass the grade with a passing grade. And another option you can get from dual enrollment is pursuing an associate's degree or a GE certification. I know a lot of people who completed a specific associate's degree, which is the liberal arts in mathematics and science. So that's something you can do. So it doesn't really carry any weight on your application, but if that's something you want to pursue, you can definitely do that. And also another thing I want to add is by doing as many dual enrollment classes, you can also work towards something called IGETC. IGETC is a general education pattern, which we'll actually cover later in this presentation. And dual enrollment, there are certain restrictions, like you can take a specific number of units. And also some classes are restricted because they're reserved for the actual community college students. So you want to research into all of that before you plan out which courses you want to take. And as a general rule of thumb, you can take any class, but a lot of them won't be open. Yeah. Go to the next one, please. Okay. And so the California High School Proficiency Exam is a standardized test in California for high school students, and it tests high school level reading, writing, and math. And this test is open for students who are ages 16 plus, have completed their sophomore year, or will be completing their sophomore year at the end of the semester. This is something that I did. Basically, by passing the California High School Proficiency Exam, the CHESP, you can actually obtain a certificate of proficiency, which is recognized as the legal equivalent of a high school diploma. So by getting this and passing the CHESP, you can actually exit high school early. So you can do that as early as 10th grade. So once you finish 10th grade, you can exit high school and then work towards other things. So some options are taking the transfer route, which we'll discuss in the next slide. And also other options are entering the workforce, career training, or pursuing personal interests. So the transfer route is where students spend 2 years at a community college to complete lower division and general education requirements. And by doing that, you can transfer into a four-year institution, which is known as university, as a third-year student. So basically, you'll skip over those first 2 years and you'll join as a junior. So you can complete your bachelor's degree in 2 years. So the general timeline for the transfer route would look something like the one shown in the presentation. So you would complete high school first. You can do that either by getting a high school diploma, or you can pass the CHESP and get a certificate of proficiency. And then after that, you would enroll in your local community college. And over the course of the next 2 years, you'd want to start completing your lower division major requirements and your general education coursework. So if you're still unsure about what you want to do as a major, that's fine. You can just start working on your GE coursework, and that will actually waive the general education requirements once you transfer to a university. And it also gives you more time to decide what it is that you really want to do. So at the end of your first year in community college, that is when you usually begin transfer applications. This includes the tag application as well, which we'll get to later as well. And this is also the regular transfer college application. So as mentioned before from the previous slides, a well-rounded application would consist of everything as it would in high school. So you need a good GPA and extracurriculars, which you should try to focus on what is something that relates to your major more than like regular extracurricular activities. And actually for transfer applications, SAT is not required at all because you are taking college level coursework. So colleges do not require SATs in most cases. That's the case for the UCs and the CSUs, but I think for certain private universities, you have to still take the SAT. So once you complete the transfer applications at the end of your second year, you will transfer to a four-year institution, and then you spend 2 years there and you can obtain your bachelor's degree. So why should you take the transfer route? For me personally, I thought it would be a great option to save on time and money. So that's the main reason I chose it. But here's some other pros of the transfer route are first of all, it saves time and money, and then you have a smoother transition into college. Because you're going to a community college, it is still college level coursework. So you'll have an easier time transitioning into university level coursework once you transfer. And it also builds up good academic foundation. So you'll build up good study habits and build connections with professors and all that, which is something that you actually don't get at a university. So the good advantage of doing the community college route is you get to connect with professors, get their advice during your first 2 years, and that helps you prepare for your what it is you want to do later in your career. And another pro of the transfer route is the flexibility of coursework. You don't have to take 2 years. So the general timeline is you do 2 years of community college and then 2 years of university. It doesn't have to be 2 years. You can take as long as you want. Some people go up to even 4 to 6 years, and you can even stretch out your coursework so you can pursue other personal interests during that time. Or if you want to work while taking the course, doing that coursework, that's something you can do as well. And then the last pro is easier admission. It's not by that much, but transfer applicants do have a higher percentage of getting admission into some certain colleges, just because there's a fewer number of transfer applicants compared to first-year applicants. So moving on to the cons of the transfer route is the limited university experience. So because you're joining the university in the third year, you're going to miss out on certain opportunities that you would during your first few universities, like building connections with other college students, like research opportunities. And also something else is that you may feel excluded socially because people will already have their own groups and then you're joining in later on. So you can still connect with other transfer applicants, but that's something you may want to consider. And then another con of the transfer route is limited resources. So when you join a university directly, you can take part in research opportunities or other internship opportunities. That is not available as much in community college. They don't really do much research. So that's something you would miss out on if you were to take the transfer route. And like I mentioned earlier, social disconnection, you might not find any friend groups because you're joining later on into the university. So that's another con of the transfer route. And the other con is the lack of mental growth. So this is, but by this, what I mean is like you're still pretty what do you call it? Like if you're taking the CHESP and you finished high school 2 years early, you would be pretty young when you're entering your third year of university. So you might not be ready to handle that level of academic rigor. So that's something you might want to consider if you're not ready for that kind of challenge. So that's another con. And the other the last con of the transfer route is eligibility requirements. Because you are expected to perform well academically, the requirements are much tougher. So like in a high school, you'd have a well-rounded application would be you take good coursework, you have good extracurriculars. In a transfer application, your academics matter a lot more. You have to meet certain GPA requirements for certain colleges that can be up to 3.5, which is a pretty tough GPA to get, considering there's only unweighted GPA in community college. You do not have any weighted GPA. So another option for transfer admission is the transfer admission guarantee, which is the TAG program. And this offers guaranteed admission into one of 6 UCs for qualifying transfer students. And the six UCs that participate in the TAG program are Davis, Irvine, Merced, Riverside, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. So Berkeley, LA, and San Diego do not take part in the TAG program. So the TAG application, like I mentioned earlier, is completed just prior to the transfer UC application. So the TAG application, the TAG agreement will outline certain coursework, GPA requirements, and unit requirements you need to meet. So generally it's around 60 units, and depending on your major, it can be around 2 to 3.5 GPA. And also you'll have a list of lower division coursework that you'll need to complete before your transfer. So that's, if you were to meet all those requirements, you would be offered guaranteed admission into that UC that you chose. But if you fail to meet even one of those requirements, the TAG agreement can be revoked. So this is a little bit of a challenge. So if you don't want to like stress yourself too much, then it's probably best to just take the regular transfer application. And then the last thing we'll talk about for the alternative pathways are the intersegmental general education transfer curriculum, and which is also known as the IGETSI. And like I said earlier, this is a general education pattern that can be used to satisfy university general education requirements at a local community college. You can do this as a part of dual enrollment or as a part of the transfer route. And the IGETSI generally consists of 6 areas, sometimes 7, because CSUs require you to complete an American institutions requirement. So area 1 is English and communication. So that's around 2 to 3 courses. It will be about writing, composition, and the last one is oral communication. And area 2 is mathematical concepts and quantitative reasoning. So this is just one math course that you need to take. Of course, if you're doing a STEM related major, you will have to take more math courses, but for the general education purposes, you only need to take one math course. And also you can overlap general education requirements and lower division requirements. You don't have to take those separately. And then area 3 is arts and humanities, 3 courses in that. Area 4 is social and behavioral sciences, 3 courses. Area 5 is physical and biological sciences. So this is, you would complete 1 physical science course and 1 biological science course. And you also need to complete a lab component either separately or as a part of one of those courses. And then the last part is area 6, which is a language other than English, a foreign language. So this can also be satisfied by 2 years of high school, a foreign language in high school. If you completed that, then you don't have to do this part. And also the requirements can vary between various community colleges. So you might want to check with your local community colleges before continuing.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to student wellness and time management. So time management and student wellness are really important because when we're balancing the things that we talked about earlier, like classes, AP, SAT, PSAT, whatever you may run into in high school, you don't want to burn yourself out. So the first thing I want to say is that instead of just studying, you want to study how to study. Now, I'll explain what that means. Many people just get straight into studying, but you have to know the study methods. I used to memorize everything before I got into high school. I would just open the book and try to memorize as much as I could. But what I realized is that different classes need different types of studying. For example, in math, you need to repeat the procedure over and over. In physics, you need a conceptual understanding. You need to draw diagrams and watch videos. In biology, you need to memorize different names of different hormones, molecules, compounds, whatever. In chemistry, it's the same thing. So different classes require different methods of studying. So I would recommend that at the beginning of each year, when you're figuring out which classes you're going to take, make sure you also write down and document the method that you're going to study for each class. And feel free to tweak it as the year goes on, but try to maintain that throughout the year. Maintain a method. Now, the second thing is that you want to manage your academics and your extracurriculars. Like Atia said before, extracurriculars are important, but academics and GPA are way more important. If your extracurriculars are preventing you from finishing your homework on time or are causing you to get worse test scores, that's when you know it's too much. So that's when you should dial back the extracurriculars. Now, the third thing is planning, right? Half the battle when it comes to time management is just planning. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. If you plan, you've already done half the effort. I would recommend using a planner like the one that you can see on the screen. And simply just writing it down can save you so much time during the week. When I was in the first couple of years of high school, I never used to use a planner. And I wasted so much time figuring out what to do, where to find the assignment, and where to submit it, when to submit it, things like that, right? If you use a planner and plan your assignments ahead of time, all you have to do is actually do those assignments and it'll save you so much time. And once you have planned everything out, the main thing that you need to stay on track is discipline. Discipline is super important. In your head, there's distractions like, your phone, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. And then there's discipline. Those two concepts are fighting against each other for your attention. You have to use your discipline to fight away your distractions and delay them until you're done with your work. That's something that I struggled with a lot because I would just let myself get distracted and then I would end up, I would be studying at like 2 a.m. You don't want to be doing that. You want to get your work done first and then do things that are more fun. You have to be disciplined enough to delay your distractions. Okay, next slide. So the next thing is physical and mental well-being. Now, the first point and the most important point by far is prioritize sleep. You have to be getting enough sleep. It's important to your mental acuity that you get enough sleep. And you also need high quality sleep. Make sure you're not looking at devices 2 to 3 hours before sleep, or at least put the blue light filter on your devices, which is available on most devices. Don't eat right before you go to sleep. Don't cram studying super late. Well, in most cases, in 90% of cases, unless it's a super important exam, cramming is going to hurt you more than it is going to help you. It's better to just get that good night's sleep than just study at like 3 a.m., right? There's levels to this. Sure, on some nights you're going to have to study late, but try to keep it in regulation. When I was in junior year, I actually struggled with sleep a lot. and I was still getting good grades. The thing was, I didn't realize my sleep was so bad. I was overworking myself. I was sleeping at around 1:30 to 2 a.m. every day, and then getting up again at around 6 a.m. Or 6:30, which meant I was getting, very little sleep. And I wanted to figure out exactly how much sleep I was getting, right? So I got this app on my phone and I started tracking my sleep every night when I went to sleep. I would turn it on and go to sleep, right? And here's what I got. So the stats were in 177 nights of sleep, which is basically the whole school year. I averaged 5 hours and 36 minutes of sleep per night. 5 hours and 36 minutes. And just for reference, you're supposed to get around 8 hours to 9 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours to 9 hours of sleep per night just to be healthy. So even though my grades were good and my extracurriculars were fine, my physical condition was just deteriorating, and this caused me, to be stressed. It caused me to get, brain fog. It caused injuries in sports. In my cross country and track, it caused me to get injured. So you want to prioritize your sleep. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to overload, like I talked about before. Same thing, junior year, I was doing way too much. I had 4 AP classes, an honors class, cross country, track and field, Boy Scouts Eagle Project, another research project, studying for the PSAT and the SAT. That is way too much. You just want to have a couple things that you're really passionate about. And then once again, there's a healthy amount of stress. You want to have a good amount of stress, which helps you perform better, but you don't want to, there's always regulation in this. You don't want too much stress that will cause health problems. And the last thing is building a support system. A lot of times high school kids will be so dialed in on performance that they won't open up to you as parents. So this is mostly for parents. You have to maintain an open dialogue, and you actually have to actively ask your student how they are. So going back to my example, I was doing completely fine, right? I was getting good grades, SAT went fine, all my clubs were going fine, but on the inside, I was deteriorating physically and in health wise, right? So you have to make sure to build a support system with your student and give them outlets, right? And the last thing is social life. I think Atia wanted to talk about this.
I'll keep it very brief. One of the main things that I want to say, and I'm sure all of you have heard your parents say this, is that the people that you surround yourself with will have an influence on you. The people that you're going to high school with, taking classes with, hanging out with outside of high school will definitely have an influence on the way you behave as a person, the way you perform in your classes, even down to maybe what clubs and extracurriculars you choose. And so there's a fine line between having friends and then having friends that push you to do a lot of things. There's a lot of outside influences in high school, and it's very, very good to have a social life. You should definitely have one. You should definitely hang out with your friends, but make sure you choose the right people. So the people that you go through high school with are going to be, again, part of your support system for all those 4 years. They're going to be the people that you may open up to more than you talk to your parents or your siblings or people outside of school. And so choosing those people correctly and setting boundaries is very, very important. So I do want to make it clear that yes, you should absolutely have a social life. And for the parents here, allow your students to have a social life. Don't let their lives revolve around school. It's 100% should be a priority, but allow them to have a social life because that is a big part of their support system. But on the flip side, the students should be very, very careful with who you allow into your closest circles, what kind of things that you do, and how that will affect you academically, physically, mentally is going to be very, very big. So kind of a warning and also an encouragement to go out there and have a good social life, but take care of yourself. And that pretty much wraps up our presentation. We'll now go through Q&A. We'll take a look at the form. If there's any questions and people are more comfortable putting it in the chat, you can also do that. We'll give it a minute or two. Okay, we'll start with the questions. The first question is there any benefit credit if I join the band in middle school and high school?
So yeah, band in certain schools, if your school offers it, does count as visual and performing arts credit. About the middle school part, generally anything you do in middle school does not really transfer to high school other than foreign language. So I can't speak for the middle school, but in high school, yeah, if you take it as a course, or even an extracurricular, it does count.
Great, thank you. Second question is club selection related to the courses which we will be selecting during college? I can answer this. No, not necessarily, but like we said earlier, we want to sort of gear ourselves to go into a certain pathway. You can obviously do clubs that interest you. So if you're interested in photography, join a photography club. If you're interested in speech and debate, join speech and debate. It doesn't have to do it doesn't necessarily have to do with what you're going to major in college. I will say though, for example, if you're interested in pre-med in college, maybe joining a health club might be beneficial, and working in the health club would help you in your college applications if you're gearing towards that kind of major. So it's not necessary, but it might be helpful. The next question is, can we take Tamil as a foreign language? Will it be added to high school credit?
As far as I know, you should take foreign language classes at your school. I'm not completely sure if Tamil counts, maybe if you went to Tamil school and have a certificate, but I would recommend taking a foreign language that's offered at your school because, like, as everyone knows, like, learning a new foreign language is a skill and it takes a lot of work, and it's impressive to colleges when you can get an A or succeed in those new language that's not your mother tongue.
I do want to add on to that. So they're in like Tamil academies in the Bay Area specifically. I don't know outside of the Bay Area. They do have like high school credit programs where you do, I think, once a week 4-hour classes, and you can get high school credit through that program. I don't know the exact details, but there are programs available. But like Shahana said, it is very impressive to have another language that is not necessarily your own language on your college applications. Okay. Next question is, does volunteering in masjids or religious organizations count for community service?
It most definitely does. One thing I would say is at your masjid or the religious organization, try to find a leader or someone who can basically sign off or document your hours. This is just going to help verify your hours, whether you use it for, like some high schools require that you have a certain number of hours for graduation and some don't. So the verification will always help, but it does, it counts.
All right. Can you please tell us about varsity in sports, or just JV versus varsity in general?
So junior varsity and varsity are just two different levels that they have in each sport in high school. There's a stigma that you need to be an 11th grader or 12th grader to play varsity, or that you need to be between 9th and 10th grade to play for junior varsity. It's more about skill level. It obviously differs for each sport, but it just comes down to skill level, and varsity being more skilled. And typically when you're looking at inter-school competition, varsity will play against varsity. So when you have like a varsity tennis team, they'll play against the opposing varsity tennis team of another high school, and the JV team of a certain school will play against the JV team of another school. That's all.
All right. Can we talk a little bit more about how PSAT scores help with scholarships?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, when you take the PSAT, it's the top 1% of scores every year that get a chance to be in the scholarship competition. So it's a scholarship competition. So in my year, I got a 1500 on the PSAT, and the score cutoff I think was 1490, which qualified me for the competition. But that doesn't necessarily mean you get the scholarship, right? You have to, once you get the qualifying score, which is 1%, the top 1% of all scores in your state, right? So California, then You have to write an essay and submit your grades and things like that. And then they'll select about half of those people to become a finalist. So there's semifinalists and finalists. So now, if you get finalist, you have a chance to win $2,500. That's pretty nominal. I mean, $2,500 doesn't really cover much in terms of college, but even if you get semifinalist, that's when colleges will start to offer scholarships to you. So one of the biggest ones is USC, right? So the way these scholarships don't work is that they don't necessarily give you the money in your hand. They the colleges themselves as an organization will take money off of your tuition. So there's a college called USC, University of Southern California in LA. If you apply to their college and you're a national merit semifinalist and you are accepted, then they'll take half of your tuition off. So their tuition is something crazy right now. I think it's like 90K. They'll take 45,000 off, right? And then your remaining tuition is 45,000. So actually no, that their tuition is like 70K, but same thing, right? These scholarships aren't given to you in your hand, they're taken away from your tuition. So that's how it works. You have to get your top 1% score first and then submit your college applications. Once you're accepted, then your scholarship is given to you. Yeah.
Right. When do we start preparation for SATs and ACTs?
Like I said before, it's all about time. So I would recommend starting either like end of 9th grade or beginning of 10th grade. So that gives you a good 2 years to 1.5 years to study. I think that's what you need. You don't really need to start in middle school or like 9th grade. That's kind of overkill. I'd recommend starting like end of 9th grade, beginning of 10th grade. You get that 1.5, 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit more about dual enrollment? I can answer this. So dual enrollment, again, is when you basically take community college classes alongside high school, and this can be taken either over the summer or during the school year. High schools have different limitations on what you can take. Some high schools only allow a certain number of units to be taken outside of their school during the school year, not during the summer. And each school has different policies regarding what they will articulate those courses on or as on your transcript. So for example, if you take a biology class in community college, there are some high schools that will accept that biology class at community college as AP Bio on your transcript. But a lot of schools do not do that. So you have to be very careful with understanding your school's policies before you choose to go through dual enrollment. And this doesn't necessarily, it's not like a huge commitment where if you choose to do dual enrollment, you have to take like a bunch of classes. You can take 1 or 2 classes outside of high school just to get an idea of what college level coursework is like, and also just to get a couple of extra things to put on your transcript or to go towards the grade section of your application. As mentioned before, some people do pursue associate's degrees alongside high school, and this is completely up to you. I'm not 100% sure on where in the application that will be placed, but again, a lot of high schools allow it on their own transcript, so you would have to check. But the gist of it is that you take college classes alongside high school classes, but you have to be very careful with the policies that your school allows. So I would recommend checking with your own school on what their dual enrollment policy is, and then arranging your course load accordingly. All right, the next question is, will there be any difference in job opportunities if you choose the transfer route over traditional routes?
Yeah, I can answer this. So not necessarily, but from what I know, from personal experience, community college shows that you are ready for a college level coursework, and you'll also be more advanced since you're taking the lower division courses. So you might have an easier time landing an internship as compared to a regular high school student. But generally, like after your undergraduate degree, not necessarily, because even on your bachelor's degree, it's not going to say that you transferred from an institution. You'll get the same bachelor degree as a first-year student.
Yeah, just to add on to that, the degree that you'll be sending in your job applications or to whatever jobs you're looking for is going to be the final degree that you get. So no matter a student that went to a university for 4 years versus one that went to 2, it doesn't matter because they'll end up with the same degree and applying to the same jobs. It won't depend on where they went to high school or community college. Next question, how to balance AP and honors courses during high school?
Okay, so for AP and honors courses, generally what happens is that they only offer AP courses at your school to juniors and seniors. So people usually take honors courses in their freshman and sophomore years. Towards your junior and senior years, I recommend you take AP courses rather than honors courses because AP courses are only a little bit, or like, it's not a huge difference from honors courses in regards to workload. And at the end of the day, AP courses are like give you college credit in some cases. So that's how I would balance them to separate it throughout the years.
2 sort of follow-up questions to that. How many minimum are needed to college? So I'm assuming how many minimum AP and honors, and why is it important to complete this minimum by 11th grade? Like, is it important or helpful for early admission on applications?
Okay, so there's no minimum, but what you want to do is make sure you progress, like you show the progression on your transcript. Maybe in sophomore year you take 1, then in junior year you take 3. You don't want to go lower than that in your senior year. You want to show progression, like you get more advanced as you progress in your high school career. So I won't say there's a minimum, but maybe you should take, people take around at least 5, I would say. So 5 AP classes. And for honors, I don't think there's no way to gauge because generally people take AP courses. So yeah. And so for why is it important to complete minimum with 11th grade? It's not important to complete it within 11th grade. It's just that usually when you're applying to college in 12th grade, they look at your 11th and 10th grade transcripts the most. So if you are successful in completing your AP classes, then it looks better on your application. Like you were able to get A's in like college level classes.
Okay, thank you. Is being in a school team better than playing for any clubs?
That one's hard to answer. It depends on your school, the sport you're playing, and the exposure that your school has to that sport. Let's say, for example, that you're really good at a certain sport, but your school is not really known for it, and you want to be recognized by colleges for that sport. In that case, it's better that you join a club because clubs have a little bit more college exposure, and you may be able to stand out there and get recruited. But let's say you're at a high school that has really good exposure for that sport and you have college recruiters continually visiting, but it's also a very competitive league that your high school is in, then it's up to you whether you want to stay with the school for that sport and compete at that level or whether you want to drop down. It's all just like based on your skill level and what your goals are for that sport.
I can add a little bit to this. I think it depends also which sport you're in. Like if you're in an individual sport such as track and field or tennis, something like that, then usually being just on the school team would suffice because you're going to be playing kids from all other high schools in the area. So if you're better, naturally you're going to get better and better opponents. But if you're in a club team, then you could just end up playing. If you're in a team that's if you're in a team sport, right? Then being on a club is very valuable if you want to get recruited for college because it's the best players often go to clubs. So that's where the higher competition is. That's where the college scouts come out. So yeah, if you're looking to get college recruited for your sport, that's when you want to be in a club.
Okay, and then similar question to what we had before. We've taken Tamil as our foreign language, which our Fremont School District accepts. Is it needed to take another foreign language? If your school district accepts it, I'm assuming you do not need to, but I would check with your high school's graduation requirements to make sure that it is fulfilled on that end.
To add on to that, like I mentioned before, I would recommend to still continue and take a new language because, like I said before, it shows it's impressive to successfully complete years and years of a new language. So still recommend it, but if it gives you credit, then that makes sense too.
Okay, and our final question is, what are the college options? Oh, there's more, sorry. What are the college options available for a special need? I can talk a little bit about this. I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know there are certain programs that have intensive support for the first 2 years of university. So this has personal mentoring and academic support in smaller groups for special needs students and people with learning disabilities. So there are colleges out there that do offer higher level of mentorship and support for students who have special needs. As for what colleges specifically, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know there are programs across the country that have support for special needs students. Okay, now our last question is, what is DECA? Okay, I will answer this.
Okay.
Sorry. DECA stands for Distributive Education Clubs of America. I'm not super familiar with it, but it is a competitive club. And so people who are in DECA are in different student divisions and have like different competition programs, but I'm not 100% sure about what specifically.
One of the programs that they have in DECA is like it's like a business competition where essentially you create a business, a fake business. It's not a real business. You just create a business to solve a problem that's set, and then you market it. You explain how it works, and then you create some presentation surrounding it, and then you go present it, right? And then whoever has the best idea wins. Basically, it's like there's various competitions just like that where you kind of work together with other teammates to create proposals and ideas and projects.
About DECA, I would highly recommend that if you plan on going the business route, that you join DECA because it is very impressive, especially if you win event at your competition. Like I've known from personal experience and friends that maybe their academics weren't their strongest point, but they had really they had recognizable awards at DECA, which really helped them in the college application process.
All right, that is all the questions that we've received on our Q&A form. Because we have a little bit of extra time, we can wait for another 2 minutes or so in case any other parents want to add questions in the Q&A form, and then we can wrap up. Right, looks like that about covers it. So thank you to anybody who joined the session. I hope it was helpful. Oh, wait, we have one more in the chat. What are other majors where tag is not applicable?
Okay, I think I should answer this. So one major I know that tag is not applicable is computer science. That applies for most UCs. As for other specific ones, I'm not entirely sure. That varies from each UC campus. So you might want to go to the college website and check. So type in the name, say, for example, UC Davis tag applicable majors, and it will give you a list of majors that you can do tag for.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. But Jazakallah khair everyone for attending.
Right, Alhamdulillah. We'd like to probably conclude with a small thanks note to all the college students that are here, that volunteered to explain to the community like what are the different ways and stuffs and things that they need to have handy to prepare for the high school program. So as part of on behalf of the USATNMA Shura, we would like to thank each and every one of you for your efforts, sincere efforts. I'm pretty sure that it's going to help a lot of people that participated here, and those that haven't, still they'll have the hands-on to the recording, on YouTube forum. So I'm very thankful being part of this community. I see that we are stepping up to help each other and get the best and to give the best to the community in whatever ways that we can. So I sincerely thank each and every one of you once again for your great effort putting up this session for the community. Jazakumullah khairan kaseera. Right, so if there are no other questions, then I think we are good to conclude. And sorry, I just have one more question to you guys. So in case if any of the parents have any questions that arise at the later point of time, will you be able to address those questions as part of an email forum or a community forum that you have already, or do you have any advice on that?
We can definitely do that. We'll keep the forum open for parents who have additional questions, and then later on we can address them through the email form.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. I think then we're good to wind up. Thanks everyone. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Welcome.
Walaikum assalam.
Waalaikumsalam.